Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. I'll remind you, as usual, to join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter highlighting what I think and have kind of highlighted as the most important stories of the week. You can sign up on CanadaReport.co. And also, you can join the forum. We have quite a robust and active forum at CanadaPoly.com. And Val, thanks for sharing the link. Val shared a link with me yesterday, and it made it into the show today. And my jaw is on the floor. My jaw is on the floor. I'll tell you when we get to that link. It's about the kids, and yesterday's show was all about the kids. And today's show is not all about the kids, but we will touch on them because it is important to discuss everything that's going on in Canada. And there's so much. It's hard to keep track. I also heard yesterday that Catherine McKenna's husband left her. I couldn't verify that. I was like, does anybody have a link for this? Looking up divorced Catherine McKenna. Nope, nothing. Maybe I'm just not, my Google foo is failing me this morning. But anyway, let's get into the show. Let's get into talking about what we're here to talk about. The Ottawa Citizen is reporting these 4 ministers need to go, but Trudeau is too weak to fire them. I don't think that's why this is happening. Articles like this are interesting again because you think that you're going to agree with the author, but they go into things that are not important, but again, like getting the curtains when there's a flood, right? Curtains on the second floor when there's a flood in the basement. That's not what you would focus on. So this is saying Patty Haydu, Harjit Sajjan, Bill Blair, and Stephen Guilbeault should all be warming the backbenches of the House of Commons, if not outright gone. Everywhere you look, ministerial incompetence abounds. Blair can't keep the borders shut to variants, see, or make quarantine operational. Okay, Guilbeault didn't appear to know what was in his department's dangerous internet censorship bill while he was trying to defend it. The government has since retreated. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't, and we'll get to that in a minute. Sajjan is lying about what the military ombudsman told him regarding former Chief of Staff Jonathan Vance. Yeah, that's true. And 15 months of pandemic hell, Haydu is showing no mastery of fire, only a propensity to get burned. Yeah, right. Patty Haydu has been an absolute dumpster fire of a health minister during this pandemic, right? During this disaster, this self-imposed disaster. We are, well, I'll get to that in the redacted part of the show. But all of these ministers should be removed. And the most important thing that is happening in Canada right now is being ignored pretty much at every level. Although there is a little sliver of hope, I think, actual hope in the article that I read here. The CBC article has a sliver of hope. But we'll start with Pierre Poilievre quoting Elon Musk. And he says that Elon Musk says that we need oil. And he's asking one of the CEOs of the companies, where do you want the oil produced? Do you want it made in Canada, or do you want it extracted in Canada? Or do you want it extracted in a Middle Eastern country and we pay for it here? Because we're going to use the oil no matter what. Where do you want it? Where do you want the jobs and the refineries and the drilling and all of that stuff to take place? In Canada or outside of Canada? And he highlights that. It's a 5-minute speech. It's more entertaining than the other speech that I didn't show yesterday, but I'm not going to show this one today because I've got lots and lots of tabs. Okay. Line 5. Basically, I don't think that they want the oil produced in Canada, but they're not going to admit that outright, right? They're going to do what they're doing here, ignoring massive shutdowns and then, I don't know, not having a plan B and not even really debating it. So Blake Richards, and he's an MP, he says, today I'm requesting an emergency debate on the potential May 12th shutdown of the Line 5 pipeline that transports oil and gas from Alberta to Ontario. Read my letter to the Speaker of the House of Commons below. And they did do the emergency debate, and this person live tweeted it, and it was quite entertaining to read what she was writing. I thought it was pretty funny. She says, oh my God, now Oliphant is defending the West and how we need to have buyers for our oil and how we are the best at oil production and the pipelines are the best and safest way to do that and the cleanest way to do it. Oh, to be followed with, that's why we need to fight for Line 5. Right. Here is the letter from Blake Richards that kicked off that debate. I'll just read the first page here because I think that it encapsulates the urgency, right? Sorry, Twitter's, my mouse double clicks sometimes when I don't anticipate it. Mr. Speaker, I'm writing to seek leave for the adjournment of the House for the purpose of discussing an important matter requiring urgent consideration pursuant to Standing Order 52, That is an emergency debate on the impending Line 5 pipeline shutdown. The governor of Michigan has ordered this critical piece of Canadian infrastructure to be shut down by May 12th. The failure of this Liberal government to secure the continued operation of this pipeline requires the immediate attention of this House. The governor of Michigan ordered this shutdown last November. 6 months later, and only a week from the shutdown deadline, the Liberals have yet to ensure the continued operation of this vital energy supply. Line 5 is a crucial link between the energy producers in the West and consumers in the East. It serves to unite economic regions of Canada as Alberta fuels Ontario and Quebec. The Minister of Natural Resources confirms that this one pipeline is responsible for 53% of Ontario's crude and 66% of Quebec's. This one pipeline is responsible for the majority of propane in Ontario and Quebec. Without this pipeline, gasoline prices would skyrocket, the economies of Ontario and Quebec would crash. Propane suppliers would disappear, wiping out farmers, shutting down warehouses and threatening heating and life-saving equipment at hospitals that are already stretched beyond capacity. This is not just a threat to the tens of thousands of direct jobs in Alberta, Sarnia, Montreal, and Quebec, but the 40 million Canadians and Americans that rely on the products produced by these refineries for the necessities of life. In short, the shutdown of this pipeline could cause catastrophic economic damage to Canada at a time when COVID-19 has already created an incredible burden on Canadian workers. With this in mind, I request, Mr. Speaker, that you accept this request for an emergency debate so that the members of Parliament can debate this urgent crisis. They debated it, right? They debated it, and I don't know what the outcome of this debate really was. The CBC is reporting 12 hours ago that the possible shutdown of Line 5 is not a threat to Canada's national security, says the ambassador. So we'll read that. And he's got some reasonable logic here that I can follow. However, this is not a foregone conclusion, and I'm still concerned about this. Okay. Canada's ambassador to the United States that while the potential shutdown of Line 5 is a serious issue, it is not a threat to Canada's national energy security. Quote, it's not a threat to Canada's national economic or energy security, Kristen Hillman told CBC News Network's Power and Politics on Thursday. I think it's an important dispute or disagreement that exists between Enbridge and the state of Michigan and that needs to be taken very seriously, and we are taking it very seriously. Line 5, which runs through Michigan from the Wisconsin city of Superior to Sarnia, Ontario, crosses the Great Lakes beneath the environmentally sensitive Straits of Mackinac, which link Lakes Michigan to Lake Huron. The pipeline carries petroleum east from Western Canada. Once it hits Ontario, most of the crude oil is turned into fuel that meet almost 50% of the provincial fuel demands. The remainder of the supply is sent to Quebec refineries through Line 9, where it provides 40 to 50% of the province's fuel supply. The threat to the pipeline's viability kicked off in November when Michigan Governor Whitmer revoked the 1953 easement, which has allowed the pipeline to operate without incident for more than 65 years over fears of an oil spill. Enbridge was granted approval to replace the underwater line with a tunnel, but Whitmer's election in 2019 put a stop to those plans. The notification that the easement was being withdrawn said the pipeline should be shut down by May 12th, prompting concerns on both sides of the border that shortages of essential fuels would follow. Enbridge took Michigan to U.S. federal court over the dispute, and both parties were ordered to find a resolution through mediation last month. That was the court decision that I said didn't exactly go our way. So finding a middle ground where one person wants an essential pipeline shut down and the other person doesn't, that's difficult. That's a little difficult to do. Anyway, back to this. Hillman says finding a compromise between Enbridge and the state of Michigan is the only way the impasse will be resolved. She said she remains optimistic that despite the firm date in the notice, the oil will continue to flow, at least in the short term. Quote, we understand from the advice that we received that there's a good chance that the pipeline will continue operating during the course of the litigation and mediation, she told guest host David Common, the person she was speaking with on Power and Politics. So yesterday I was musing that maybe they would shut it down and then take it to court, right? Like shut it down, and while we're discussing this, like it's past May 12th, so we'll shut it down, which is what I want, and we'll discuss this, and if you get what you want, we'll turn it back on. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen. So that's, I think, good news at the very least. Okay, we'll get to the end of this article and we'll carry on. All the jet fuel produced at Pearson International Airport is made with crude supplied by this pipeline. Enbridge, which owns Line 5, says the Ontario fuel supply would be cut in half if the pipeline is shut down, but its closure would not only affect Quebec and Ontario. Enbridge says shutting down the pipeline would also harm Michigan, which gets 55% of its propane needs from more than 540,000 barrels of light crude oil, light synthetic crude, and natural gas liquids that travel through the Line 5 before being refined into propane in the state. Enbridge Senior Vice President Mike Fernandez says that he's also confident the pipeline will continue to operate beyond May 12th, but the passing of the deadline will likely prompt protests from anti-pipeline activists. The reason I say that is because the matter right now is situated in the U.S. Federal District Court that has prompted both parties, that is the state and Enbridge, to work through a mediator, Fernandez told Common. If the state took actions, they would be acting outside of the standard good faith that is normally required in such mediation. So there's a little bit more to that, but I think that kind of encapsulates it. So some tentative good news and real good news. Like, I'm not trying to be trite about it or tongue-in-cheek about it. It sounds like no extra added crisis. Litigation and maybe crisis on the horizon, but we've got time to build a plan B, right? Kind of like adding hospital beds and ICU beds over the past year like Doug Ford's been doing, right? Right. Time to double down on that litigation and not plan at all, right? You make sure that litigation is the most important thing, and we don't have any extra resources to do a plan B, so make sure you don't lose, guys, right? Like, yeah, welcome to Canada. We're just flying by the seat of our pants here. Woo, we've had a year of data. Who cares? Woo! Michael Geist, moving into free speech. The government insists Bill C-10 doesn't regulate user-generated content. The reality, the bill gives CRTC the power to set conditions on the content. If TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube feeds set conditions on the content of TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube feeds. No other country thinks that this regulation is doable or appropriate. So yeah, I mean, I think it's already in place. I really do think that there's I was growing very fast on YouTube, very fast. And I'm growing kind of medium on Rumble. It's okay. But I grew very fast initially, up to 10,000, and then I stagnated. And I've been at 14,100 subscribers since 2021, basically, like all of 2021, which is fine. It doesn't bother me. I don't do this for the subscriber count. I'm not worried about that. But I think that it's interesting because usually YouTube, if you consistently put videos out, the algorithm alone just puts you in front of new eyeballs because there are people who just consume video, right? And now the algorithm doesn't put me in front of anyone. And again, I'm not complaining. I'm just using it as an example of, I think this is already enacted. I think that YouTube is already trying to do this or whatever this calls for. And just to comply with potential Canadian law. I don't know. I think that YouTube and Facebook and a bunch of the other big tech giants are hand in glove with our Canadian government. And I think that Canada is a bit of a petri dish. Guelph used to be a petri dish as well. We had Mondex and we had Interact before other people had Interact. Like the Interact was rolled out at Stone Road Mall. I remember my mom getting her card, right? So it's Guelph has been a test ground for societal nudges, I guess, for a long time. But I think Canada is for this. I think Canada is for YouTube. I think Canada is for a whole bunch of other stuff. Very interesting. Very interesting. And that's anecdotal. That's just based on my experience. But it's interesting. It's interesting, right? I don't know what my analytics looks like for my podcast on Spotify or anything like that. I really should look. I don't know what it is. Anyway, Michael Geist says, back to this story and not me. I'm not the story. Heritage meeting adjourned. This is 13 hours ago. The other tweet was 23 hours ago. Heritage meeting adjourned. Strange meeting, but the key takeaway on Bill C-10, the government is not backing down on regulating user-generated content and giving the CRTC the power to regulate TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram feeds in the name of discoverability. Yes, I can't wait to be buried to the bottom, right? I can't wait to be told that my content isn't serving enough people and so I have to change it or stop doing it. Yes, right. Here's Roman Baber talking. This is free speech in that the Canadian and specifically the Ontario government is just fine with the CPSO regulating doctors' speech and preventing them from speaking out. Roman Baber is incredulous. Yesterday I showed you this clip where he asked Miss Elliott what she thought of the CPSO. This is the follow-up, and I think it's worthwhile to listen to, so we'll listen to it. And his point is well made. Here's Roman Baber.
Speaker, there is no room for ambiguity here. The statement of the CPSO speaks for itself, and it shocked many doctors in the medical profession. COVID or no COVID, we're still a Western democracy. This government, this minister, have a responsibility to defend speech. We're talking about doctors duly licensed in the province of Ontario, not rogue dissidents who are threatening the regime. A doctor should be able to say that a lockdown is harmful. A doctor should be able to say that masks outside make no sense, even if public health recommends them in some outdoor situations. Censoring medical speech because it's dangerous to people's safety is something you'd expect from a totalitarian regime. Is there a line that we will not cross? So I ask the minister again, will she stand up for Ontario's doctors and disavow the threat they made against Ontario's doctors last Thursday?
Thank you very much. Well, I would say to the member, through you, Mr. Speaker, I don't understand what your significant concern here is. This is something that the College of Physicians and Surgeons is simply advising the doctors to rely on their own medical information and knowledge and experience and speak to anybody asking questions of them and providing them with accurate medical advice. That's what the college should advise the physicians to do, and that is what they are doing now. So
she doesn't see a problem with it. No problem with it. And if you haven't read the statement, he follows it up for the sake of the college's credibility. Says, Mr. Bauer, it must be withdrawn. And yeah, it's a direct threat against physicians speaking out against the right think currently. Okay, here is Mark Gerritsen talking about C10, and he's doing his best Oliver Jewelers commercial version, and he doesn't talk about anything of substance. Nothing of substance is addressed in this at all. And not that it's concerning. I don't really expect much more, but it is purely to sway people who Google for this or people who follow him. He's not going to convince anybody who is actually looking at what's going on at all. Anybody who's looked at the bill or anybody who's been paying attention to what's been happening up till now, this is not a convincing piece of video. But it may convince people who don't bother to look and say, "Oh, those silly conservatives, ho ho ho!" Right? That's the target. That's the target audience for this. I fully believe it. This is the article that Val sent me yesterday, and it's about Quebec and it's about the kids. It says Quebec could review the principle of parental primacy. Parental primacy. Here's the clip about that. One of the elements that could be changed, they're saying that the laws governing the wellness of children should be changed because they haven't been updated in 40 years. One of the elements that could be changed is the notion of parental primacy, says Comment. The well-being of the child must come first. Science shows us that things have changed. Science. You cannot dispute science, right? Science. Oh, can't dispute it. Okay, science has changed. It doesn't necessarily have to be the biological family. The child must be in a loving environment. There you go. The minister also adds the concept of confidentiality cannot take precedence over the well-being of the child. Sometimes confidentiality puts the child at risk. It can't go on. A foster family must know what is endangering the child's life, what the child has gone through, and how he will react in certain situations. I think that it's an interesting thing talking about protecting the child must be paramount. The parent doesn't get a say. Like, the state has determined that your child is in danger, and so the state is going to act in this way. And if you as a parent disagree with that, how do you address that? Finally, Mr. Comment and Ms. Laurent believe that it is necessary to recognize the heavy load carried by the interveners of the DYP. It's difficult, complex, nuanced work, says Mr. Laurent. It's very intrusive in families, and caregivers must decide the future of the children. It shows to what extent it is a very specialized practice that must be supported. So they're talking about going in and taking children, and it's very, very hard to do. It's very hard on the family because you're taking their children. Yeah, it is. It's a very, very strange back-assward way of doing things. I'm just not going to fix that. Way of doing things. Ass-backward way of doing things. And basically saying, if the state determines that your child is, or that you're not acting in the best interest of your child under, I guess, expanded purview, then they're going to act. And they're asking for, understanding, because it's a complex, nuanced thing, and you might not get it. Wild. So I mentioned at the top of the show that I heard that Catherine McKenna's husband left her because of the article I showed you yesterday talking about Justin Trudeau being, he may be your guy, but he's not really your guy. He doesn't really believe anything he talks about, blah, blah, blah. That was Catherine McKenna's husband. And she puts out a tweet today, and I thought she was talking about him, but I don't think she is. She says, you know what I've learned? Regular people hate governments throwing stones at each other instead of helping people. Has she read Gerald Butt's Twitter feed, like, ever? You know what they hate even more? Paid attack ads in a pandemic. How about instead we work together to keep Canadians safe to get to the other side of this? This is what she's talking about. Here it is, and Inkless PW says this is what she's talking about. This is Doug Ford's attack ad about who's responsible for the COVID-19 variants getting here. The thing is, the Canadian media is gleeful at backing up this narrative, but this is a distraction. It's garbage. It's bullshit. It doesn't matter, right? Like it is not what we should be talking about. What we should be talking about is how to fix the problem. And then after we fix the problem, then we can look back and do the post-mortem. Doing this is just great, like attacking the federal government for leaving the airports open. What is the purpose of this attack ad? I don't really get it exactly from Doug Ford, but it sets up the fight between McKenna, federal, and Ford, premier, provincial. It sets up that animosity, that fight, and maybe the public will get in on it. But again, as far as the public is concerned, the crisis, we're in the middle of this crisis. We're watching other municipalities, other places, Florida, Texas, all sorts of places open up. New York is talking about opening up. There's all sorts of things happening on that front. And these people are talking about what happened to get us where we're at right now. And they're not talking about anything in the future. And we're going to go over to the redacted part of the show after this attack ad thing. But they're not talking about anything in the future. I'll show you, Alberta's just locked down. There's no metrics for Alberta to reopen. The Globe and Mail, no, Global News has that. There's no metrics for Alberta to reopen at all. The metrics they do have are muddy, and it's like, oh, we need the R value and maybe cases and maybe this and maybe that. Ontario, they moved the goalposts again to have the backlog of surgeries cleared before we can reopen. We're not going to, they don't want, I don't know what they want. I'm not going to speculate. Here's the attack ad that I think is just a distraction, and I think that I think it's not worth the time for the PC government to make the attack ad to attack the federal government. I don't know that they're going to get anything out of this meaningful. The PC government doesn't have a plan. They don't have a plan to get out of this whatsoever at all. They are in crisis, it seems. And it seems like the federal government is in crisis too. But this looks like a distractionary pantomime, a play. We're going to have a fight, so the public is kind of distracted about this fight. It's like wrestling, right? And then they're not going to pay attention to all of the actual crises that are happening, right? And then when I say it's like wrestling, they're calling each other on, right? Like, and that's part of the show, right? And then what happens, right? Like, usually in wrestling, you have a fight and somebody's the winner, and they can have crowing rights and all that other stuff. But in this situation, I don't know what happens next. It doesn't make any sense. Doug Ford's going to say close the airports, and the Liberal government's going to say, okay, we'll close the airports, but they haven't. Right? They haven't in a year. They haven't up till now. Toronto's been locked down for a year. Is anybody going to care about this? Like, nobody seems to care about this, right? We'll talk about this fight. We'll talk about how the variants got here. It's your fault. Oh, it's your fault. Instead of how are we going to fix this and get out of this? It's so frustrating. So frustrating. Okay, here's the attack ad.
COVID-19 is changing. It's more deadly and easier to get. Mutant COVID variants are flying into Canada from countries like the UK, South Africa.
Mutant COVID variants. Just the use of that term with a straight face, like, you know, you're reading a graphic novel, right? Like, the mutant COVID variants. Gotcha. Oh, all right. Okay. Next page. Let's see what happens next, right? Twists and turns.
Brazil and India. And what did Trudeau's health minister say about protecting our border?
The more countries that have outbreaks, the less relevant borders become.
Trudeau didn't close the borders when the pandemic started. He didn't close the borders when it got worse. Nobody wants a fourth wave. It's time to act. A message from the Ontario PC Party.
You like the coughing in the background? Remember Ferris
COVID-19 is
Remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he had the keyboard with the coughing in the background, right? To make his parents think that he was sick. They're trying to blame the fourth wave, the impending lockdown, on the failure of the federal government. That's what the point of that ad was. That's why they're doing that ad. Because they're going to lock us down again, and they're going to say it's because the federal government failed to close our airports. And then they'll have the Ontario public demanding that the federal government close the airports so we can avoid the fifth wave. Chess. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Could be wrong. Maybe they're just attacking the federal government for fun. I don't know. Profit. Who knows, right? Who knows? I wish I could see or articulate what the government thought the pathway out of this was. Because I don't think that anybody can. I don't think that Doug Ford, if you said, listen, Doug Ford, what's 3 weeks from now look like if everything goes perfect? How about 6 weeks from now if everything goes perfect? What does perfect look like to you? What are the metrics to open Ontario, Doug? What is one metric to open Ontario? What about Jason Kenney? You would think before shutting the entire province down, he would have some kind of metrics to a path back to normal. Nobody does. Why is that? Why is it acceptable? Why is it acceptable that they're using our taxpayer money to come up with attack ads that are basically prep for the incoming fourth wave, to get you mentally ready for the fourth wave? Because you heard third wave, and then we went through the third wave, and now the third wave's over, and people are saying we got to open up, and they're going to say, no, we can't open up, because if we open up too early, it's going to be back, and we'll be in a fourth wave. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. Okay, we're going to go over to Redacted. I've probably already angered the YouTube people. Although yesterday the show had commercials, right? I thought that was weird, because I thought I was kind of edgy yesterday, but I guess not. We're going to head over to Redacted, go and check out the other part of the show on Rumble or BitChute or Odysee. Odysee seems to be the best. Rumble has problems with the links. People can't click the links. And BitChute BitChute's pretty good, I guess. BitChute's sometimes hit or miss, but I think I've fixed the problem with the encoding. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much now. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.